SPIPA Healthy Families Video Disclaimer. The information contained in the video content posted to this site represents the views and opinions of the original creators of such video content and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the South Puget Intertribal Planning Agency. The mere appearance of such video content on this site does not constitute an endorsement by SPIPA or its affiliates of such video content. The video content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. SPIPA does not make any representation or warranties with respect to the accuracy, applicability, fitness, or completeness of the video content. SPIPA does not warrant the performance, effectiveness, or applicability of any sites listed or linked to in any video content. The video content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. Always seek professional advice with any questions you may have regarding the subject of the video content. SPIPA hereby disclaims any and all liability to any party for any direct, indirect, implied, punitive, special, incidental, or other consequential damages arising directly or indirectly from any use of the video content which is provided as is and without warranties. The production of this video content was supported by a grant from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families. Its content does not necessarily represent the official views or opinions of HHS and ACF.
So what we're talking about is 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old development today. And this is a really unique developmental stage. That's why I said this is a good one to record, because this is a good one to refer people to or to be able to go back and look at again or whatever. So I think most people understand that kids really struggle in sort of middle school. They'll talk about it like, oh, middle school, but I don't think a lot of people really understand why there's struggle at middle school, and why it's hard to live with this age of kids. And it is really challenging to live and parent with this age of children. But I think when you understand it, then I think it's easier to live with. I think it's easier to understand how to make their struggles less of a struggle and so on. So in general, what we're going to find is that we've talked about equilibrium and disequilibrium and years of equilibrium and disequilibrium. There's 2 years of disequilibrium in these 4 years, 2 years of equilibrium. 11 and 13 are 2 years of pretty severe disequilibrium, and probably more severe than what we saw in early toddlerhood. And then we have 2 years of equilibrium, which is 12 and 14. So 11 and 13 are your disequilibrium years, 12 and 14 are equilibrium years. Within that category, there's some really significant brain stuff that happens. So starting about the time that you start to enter into puberty, which is around 11 for most people. So starting around 11 and through 13, sometimes through 14, is when we see up until that point, basically your brain is developed as a child. Starting around 6 or 7, it's pretty complete. And then the gray matter starts to thicken. And that's where we get all these synapses that we have for learning and developing. And then when we hit puberty, that gray matter starts thinning, literally thinning, to a point of where we lose massive amount of synapses in that period from 11 to and sometimes through 14. And so when that happens, basically kids were pretty functional up until about age 10. And then people just assume as you mature, you're just going to get more and more and more functional. Well, that isn't what happens, is that you get functional up into 10. Then you have that period of what we call brain pruning, where we have this severe thinning of the gray matter and all of the synapses that we have in our brain. And we see this big dip in development where we actually see this, kids being way less functional than they were at 10 and seem to really be struggling. And this is where a lot of the parents get upset. It's like, well, I shouldn't have to remind you 52 times you're 12 years old, and they get very disdainful and frustrated and critical. But it really is a brain thing. And I really want people to understand this isn't a choice that kids have. It really is that they have this severe brain change. And then as we hit 14, enough of those new synapses that will eventually be our adult brain are starting to form so that they are more functional again as they get into that 15, 16, 17. But still understanding, as like when we start to talk about the 16, 17, 18, for example, people will be like, well, they're 18 years old, they're getting ready to launch and they're still, making these poor decisions. They still have another 7 years of brain development. We don't have an adult brain till we're 25 years old. So it's part of this is being realistic about what is literally happening in their brain that is really causing a lot of these behaviors. So I'm going to talk about 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds and then 13-year-olds. Then I'll come back and talk about what happens during these years because of that brain development. So that's kind of generalized for that whole age group. So in terms of your 11, so questions, first of all, does anybody have any questions for me before we start this? Okay. All right. So in terms of the 11-year-old, let's start with 11. So 11 is your year of disequilibrium, first year of disequilibrium of this age group. Let me turn off that phone, you guys. And so we haven't seen kids be as contrary as they are at 11. They are incredibly oppositional, incredibly contrary, not like we've seen since they've been 3 years old. So it is a shock, and it's particularly a shock for parents after 10, because 10 is sort of the high point of childhood. It's when, 10 is a really good year of equilibrium. Kids are incredibly functional by the time they get to 10 and capable. And then all of a sudden we hit this 11 where we just see this huge change, and it's really hard for parents to deal with. So they're very, very oppositional, very egocentric, but very high energy, incredibly high energy. They're constantly in motion, constantly eating, constantly talking, moving and fiddling and kicking their legs and, playing with their hair. And it's like ADD amplified for all of them. They're just absolutely just can't stop moving. They have very little willingness to help with anything or to cooperate in any way. That's the sort of piece of being so oppositional. And this isn't them being snots or brats or anything. This is just that their brains are just absolutely going through this major, major change. They're very slow to respond. They're very quick to criticize, particularly mothers. So you're going to find that in this age group, mothers are going to be sort of the piece that gets sort of triggered all the time. Mothers all the way through and to about 14. At 14, then fathers also get criticized. But this 11, 12, 13 are very hard on mothers, particularly. Teachers are sort of the second ones they're hardest on. So they're very quick to criticize. They aren't helpful. They're resistant to helping in almost every way. Most people say, I just don't even expect anything anymore. It's so hard to deal with them. It's definitely an age where they're playing with strength. So you're starting to see them get much bigger bodies, much more developed bodies. And so they'll do things like try to pick you up. All of a sudden you're just see that they're trying to pick you up, or they'll try to hold you down. Sometimes they're just trying to see about that body strength. And the piece that is really hard is that sometimes they'll sort of play with it sort of in an intimidating way, particularly with mothers, where they'll kind of get in your face and back you up to see if they can use their literal physical strength and size now to get some authority. And you just have to be so careful, because it really can look and feel intimidating to really not buckle under that, to sort of puff yourself up and, get your voice and your face serious. And it's like, you need to back off. And I mean, back off right now, because I don't want them to learn that that physical power is power that they want to count on. So everybody clear about that. But this is definitely an age where you're going to start to see that play with a lot, particularly with the boys. You'll see it. They're experts at baiting adults, particularly mothers. I would say they eat constantly, just constantly eating. They are away from home, really sweet. And I do want to say this, because I think when people are dealing with this age group, they are terrified about how they are in front of other adults, or what they're doing. And they really save this for home. They are actually really mannerly and helpful and pretty outgoing when they're at other people's houses. Their conduct at school is poor, but they will try to work for grades. It's just that when you have that distracted, disinterested, which we're going to talk about, it's just not stellar years. There's a reason why kids don't have middle school grades count. Part of that is because of what is happening with their brains. So middle school years are not stellar academic years for a lot of kids, and we'll go back and talk about why that is. They may say they hate school, but they don't want to miss any days. So part of what you're going to see in this age group is that there's nothing more important than love and belonging. Love and belonging is just sort of the main driver of this age group. So they want to be like their peers. Even if it's not in good ways, they still want to be like them, dress like them, talk like them. And so that love and belonging is such a driver for them. And they may say they don't want to be at school, but they don't want to be away from their peers. That's really important to them. They are oblivious to how they are with other people. So they are very sensitive to how other people are towards them, but they just really do not have a sense of how they're impacting other people, especially in their own homes. They need to be motivated from within, not without at this age. So if you're going to get any help from them at all at 11, you're better off giving them a choice. So you could say, for example, do you want to empty the dishwasher or empty the garbage? Do you want to empty the dishwasher before dinner, or do you want to empty it after dinner? So if you give them a choice, you've got a better chance of getting a little cooperation, but it's really challenging to try to get much out of them at this age. They can be incredibly violent, again, verbally and even physically, putting hands through fists through walls, saying really harsh, violent things, swearing again, kind of like we haven't seen since they were 6, actually. So it looks a little different when you have someone who's close to your size, who's beginning to, use that. It can be scary to see. But again, I want to normalize it so people aren't afraid of it and then don't give off any of those vibes like they are afraid of it, that they can hang on to that authority you have. Their humor is very smutty, very, very insulting. And so it's hard to laugh with them, because it's like the way they laugh is to make somebody the butt of a joke. And it's hard to deal with that, especially if you are the butt of the joke. They love to gossip, and there is nothing that they can't gossip about. And I'm saying this and warning you about this because that includes anything you're doing as adults. So if you and a partner, for example, had a doozy of a fight, you can almost be guaranteed they're sharing it with their peers. That's just what they do. They love drama, they love gossip, and it doesn't matter whose it is. So just, to be warned, it's a very physical age. They love motor games. Friendships, like I said, nothing is more important than love and belonging. So friendships are incredibly important, but they quarrel a lot. They have a lot of drama in these relationships. So there's a lot of somebody's in, somebody's out, somebody's being talked about. There's like very, very dynamic in these relationships, but they are alert, they're imaginative, they're energetic, they're outgoing. So, I mean, there's some sweet things about it, but it's challenging. Now, health wise, one of the things we see in this development, and we don't know how much of this is related to brain as well, but we see a lot of physical manifestations that are also really important to be aware of. So they have a lot of colds at 11, they have a lot of flu at 11, they have a lot of ear infections and pneumonia at 11. So it's really a sickly year in terms of disequilibrium as well. Their fatigue is very pronounced. They tire easily. We have kids whose allergies turn into asthma at this age. And one of the most common complaints are their feet hurting. And you'll hear a lot of them talk about their feet hurting. So what we do know is happening in these next couple of years, you'll hear me mention it again at 12 and 13 in a different way, but is that they are growing fast, and it's bone growth. And so with that bone growth, it's painful. So literally their feet do hurt. And sometimes they will talk about their legs hurting or other bones hurting. And they do hurt. And sometimes you'll hear them talk about jaw pain. Their jaws are growing and they hurt their bones. And bone pain is really uncomfortable pain. So they are actually really hurting. Now, one of the things that you're going to see up into about 14, sometimes a little bit when they're tired at 14, is what we call really common neurological tics. When this brain thinning starts to happen, one of the things that happens is they start getting tics. And tics are things like at 11, some of the most common tics are they do a lot of blinking. So you'll see them kind of do this. They're talking to you and they're like blinking both eyes, or they're kind of blinking one eye, and you're like, do you have something in your eye? And they'll be really like, no, it's like they just are ticking. They don't have any control of it. It's neurological. So when you see that kind of stuff, you really ignore it. Do not draw their attention to it, because the more uncomfortable they are, the more nervous they are, that tick is going to get stronger. So these are just normal tics that will go away as their brains continue to develop again, and that gray matter. But we'll see things like sniffing. You'll see a lot of kids do a lot of this. And you'll say, go blow your nose. And they'll say, I don't need to blow my nose. And they probably don't. They're just sniffing. It is one of the tics. They do odd facial things where they'll be talking to you and all of a sudden they'll go like that. And you'll be like, ooh, what was that? Absolutely uncontrolled. Is everybody clear? It's like they just do these weird facial grimaces because it's neurological. We see them more when they're nervous. We see them more when they're tired. But the point is, they're absolutely normal. It's important not to draw their attention to it. They will go away. But it is a disconcerting thing when you don't know what it is. We know that they fall easily. Their balance and things is not as good as it usually is. They drop things. Their sort of visual, perceptual, and fine motor capabilities get diminished. So they drop things a lot, break things a lot, that kind of thing. Sexuality wise, they're more interested in sex than they were at 10. We'll start to see them doing things like looking at getting on the internet. It's a good time to get your internet filters going and going good, because sometimes they don't even intend to. They may just be looking up egg fertilization, but the porn sites are very, very quick to attach to anything that might get someone hooked. So they're looking up egg fertilization for school, and suddenly they're on a porn site, and it's titillating for them. So even though that may be uncomfortable and they really don't want to look at it, they'll keep going back to it. So just do them a favor, just get some good filters on there that these kids don't get sort of caught up in. At the same time, it's probably not a bad idea to get some good reference books on sexuality. Or I like the Brown University website is a really good website to sort of keep on your favorites. So if they really want to learn something about sex or really see what something is in reality, they can actually look it up and have good information about that rather than information that may not be healthy or good in that way. In terms of their self-care, the other thing we see is that middle school is a very odd one for self-care and for hygiene. And so we literally see things come in and out. Like one year we may see them doing really good job on their fingernails. The next year their fingernails are disgusting. And then we may see them do something else really well on that year. And then generally around 14, we really start to see that hygiene come in and be pretty consistent. Now, one of the things that happens is this is a time where you can really undermine their self-esteem as parents. And I want to just really talk about this, because one of the things that happens when you're going through this age group is you have an incredibly active, what we call imaginary audience. That means you think everybody's looking at you, and you think they're not only looking at you and judging you, but they're judging everybody around you. It's part of the reason they're so hard on parents or on mothers, is that they feel like all their friends are looking at you. So they'll say things like, are you going to wear your hair like that to drop me off? And you're like, I'm just dropping you off. But their thought is everybody's going to see your hair like that. Everybody's going to see that you're wearing your sweats to drop me off. And so you are an extension of their imaginary audience of everybody's looking at them. Now, so they've already got that really active. They don't have good hygiene at all. So they have oftentimes very greasy, yucky hair, sometimes most amazing, horrible teeth. Looks like moss growing on them if you aren't watching. Dirty hands, etc. But here's the thing, you guys, they stink sometimes because they start to get pretty strong body odor. Their peers are not judging them. I just want to make this really clear. Their peers accept that this is what you are and look like in middle school. They are not judging them. But parents judge them a lot because they're worried they're going to be judged. So they'll say things like, you're disgusting, you stink, you need to wash your hair, you need to wash your face, you're getting so many, your face is breaking out, why are you not washing your face? We undermine their self-esteem because we're worried. We need to keep our mouths shut. Is everybody clear about this? It's one thing to say, hey babe, I put deodorant in there if you want to wear deodorant, it's up there. Hey babe, I got you this good facial wash. If you want it, it's in the bathroom. But you need not to keep bugging them about their hygiene. Okay, so at this age, what you're going to see is they have those ravenous appetites. They're very finicky at home, but they are not finicky other places. They're really mannerly. They do have trouble going to sleep. They just can't get their minds to shut down. So they can sometimes read until midnight. I do discourage people from letting them use screens at night or even keeping screens in their rooms at all, because we know that even makes it harder for their brains to shut down. And so we need to keep screens out of their rooms at night. But they do still have a hard time. So it's really okay if they want to listen to a podcast or music or something, but just be sure it's not on their phones or computers so they aren't tempted to use them. They do need lots of sleep, so they tend to be really tired the next day. That fatigue we talked about is very real. They are not getting enough sleep. They should be getting 9 hours of sleep in these next 3 years, and a lot of these kids are getting like 6 hours of sleep. And so they're pretty sleep deprived. They don't like to sleep alone again. This is the last year where a lot of your kids will ask if they can sleep with you again. And honestly, it's no big deal. If you don't mind if they sleep with you, they're big and they take up a lot of space in bed. But they are so disdainful and so oppositional that sometimes the only sweet time you're going to have with them is those few minutes before they fall asleep and those few minutes when they first wake up. And so if parents don't mind sleeping with them again this year, it's kind of the last hurrah of them ever sleeping with you again. And it could buy you a little bit of rapport building time to have those few minutes. But I just want to normalize it because it seems kind of weird to people to have all of a sudden an 11-year-old want to sleep with you again. But it's completely normal for them to do that. Once they're asleep, they can sleep through anything. They do have trouble getting up in the morning. So they're not exactly resistant to bathing, but they need lots of time to do it. They bathe for special reasons. They'll wash their hair if there's school pictures, but otherwise they go sometimes a week before they'll bathe or wash their hair. They are at this age brushing their teeth really regularly and care about that and how other people see their teeth at this point. But that doesn't mean it stays this way. I just want to keep reminding you of that. Okay, so any questions sort of about this sort of hygiene piece before we move on?
I see. How long does that phase last?
We usually see it, and again, like I said, it'll kind of come in and out of what part is bad. Like hair can be bad for a year, and then hair can be good for a year, and that kind of thing. But generally by around 14, then it's like hygiene is super important. And it's like then we start getting into the no, you can't shower twice a day. We can't afford you to stay in a shower for 45 minutes. It's like then you're going to be arguing about hygiene. But this whole middle school, that 11 through 13, is where you see that hygiene stuff really be a challenge. Okay, anybody else about this?
Is there kind of a difference between like boys and girls at this stage? Because I know I have 2 boys and 2 girls. 3 are teenagers, one's a preteen. And I noticed the boys tend to have a little bit less care about hygiene than the girls do. I mean, don't get me wrong, they have their own stages as well, but the boys tend to, in general, not have quite as much of a care about that. Is that a common thing, or is it just a personality thing?
I think it's definitely developmental, because we'll see a lot of girls at this 11, 12, 13. It kind of manifests differently. Like they'll have really greasy hair, like they'll care about putting on makeup, and but they'll have horribly greasy hair, for example, or their faces will be very broken out. They don't want to do anything around. They'll just cover it up if they can. So it kind of varies, I think, a little bit with gender, but for the most part, we see it with both. But you will see a difference with, like you said, the temperament. So, there are sometimes kids who care more about it than others, or care less about it than others. But I think you'll see it both. And by high school, generally we see at least most of the girls have they're pretty concerned about their hygiene. And honestly, we hear the most complaints about how much time boys spend doing their hair and things than we do girls, honestly, by high school. Okay, so anybody else? Okay, so emotionally, they recognize their feelings. They cry easily at this age. They cry often at this age. They don't have much ability to delay gratification. I mean, everything needs to be there. It needs to be when they want it, how they want it. They definitely have very big extremes emotionally. They can be laughing 1 second and really happy, and the next minute they're just freaking angry. And so we see a lot of this up and down, and some of that's the brain development and that difference in the neurological development. But some of it, I think, is also hormonal for a lot of these kids. So you're going to see that hormones are really up and down a lot at this age. They have a lot of fear of being alone. So at 10, they wanted to let you stay home alone once in a while. And all of a sudden now they're like, no, don't leave me alone. Can I go with you? They're afraid of disease and infection. They're a little bit neurotic a bit. So you can imagine, you know, at 11 with COVID, that some of these kids have sort of pretty high anxiety about, you know, that with them. Their feelings are hurt very easily. And one thing I want to say and remind people is that, especially for the girls at this age, they're incredibly sensitive about what their dads say. Incredibly insensitive about it. So dads have to be very careful about not saying something. So we'll see, for example, a dad say something that seems really innocent, like, you're getting so big. They'll just make that comment, you're getting so big. Suddenly we've got a girl this age who's not eating anything. What she heard her dad say was, I think you're fat. So they're incredibly sensitive. So just remind dads that they do have to be very careful and careful about their humor and that kind of thing, because they take it so seriously. They're very jealous at this age. They're jealous of their peers. They're jealous of their siblings. They're jealous of what other people have. They're very silly at this age. Very, you know, just silly, just absurdly silly. They worry a lot. So kids who are naturally sort of anxious, you really see anxiety amp up at 11. So they're very anxious age and very competitive at this age. But again, their friendships are really important to them. Nothing's more important than their friendships. Boys usually have 1 or 2, girls usually have a group of about 3 to 5, and they move around on them a lot, depending what kind of drama is happening at any one time. So we see a lot of drama. They are openly acknowledging relationships. They talk a lot about dating, and dating somebody at this age generally just means, for most of them, that they told a friend who told that they like someone, and that friend told someone they liked them, and then that friend told them back that they liked them too. That means they're dating. If they acknowledge they like each other, they're dating. Is everybody clear about that? So it's kind of freaky to hear an 11-year-old say, I'm dating this girl at school, or this, you know, but they are just saying, we're acknowledging we like each other now.
Candice?
And in this generation, just real quick, I'll come back to it. In this generation, what's nice is that they also, for the most part, are pretty comfortable acknowledging that they like same-sex people and are attracted to them. They feel safe talking about that as well, which is really nice. Yes, Morningstar.
I was just going to ask about that. Like, being, I don't want to say confused, but can they get confused on liking, like, say?
Well, so gender identity and sexual identity is really big in middle school right now, at least in this community, this, you know, our state, so to speak, or this part of our state. And so part of love and belonging is, it's cool to not be hetero. It's like, hetero is boring. You know, you're not very aware if you're hetero. So they want to be on that continuum. So a lot of kids will want to identify as bipolar or as trans or as, and in some ways I really love that they feel comfortable playing and seeing that we have this whole continuum of sexual identity and gender identity. It's really wonderful that we do is, we haven't had a generation where kids were aware, let alone felt safe to even explore that continuity
Yeah.
of, that continuum of gender and sexual identity. And so they do a lot of that right now. And I really just tell parents, because parents will say, well, I don't like the idea that they're just sort of locking into these. They only lock in if you sort of fight it. Like you
Okay.
just say, oh, that's interesting, but then you introduce that it is a continuum, and that continuum is dynamic,
Mhm.
that, there's all kinds of places on this continuum besides hetero, homosexual, or bisexual, and that you could be anywhere on that. We all are on that continuum somewhere, and that continuum can change. It can change as we get more aware of who we are. It can, move us somewhere else on the continuum. It can change by who we love and meet. That can change where we are on the continuum. So, I just want them to know that it's dynamic and they're not locked into anything. But I don't ever want them sort of told that they don't know, because
Yeah.
that just makes them feel like they want to lock in more.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Let's see. Anything else that you should know? A lot of teasing. Boys especially do a lot of teasing, and being, careful to talk to them about what they do when they're teasing, and is it appropriate in terms of how they're teasing girls, or if it's kind of crossing over into actually being inappropriate in terms of what they're saying and doing. They also tease each other. Boys will teach each other a lot. And the thing I worry about with the boys is that boys will oftentimes act like they're enjoying it, or that they don't care, but they aren't enjoying it. They do care. A lot of them have incredible anxiety about going to school, because they aren't giving really congruent responses. They need to be able to say, I don't like it when you do that. I don't think that's funny. Don't tease me about my size. Don't tease me about my weight, etc. And so then they get incredibly self-conscious, because they also have these huge imaginary audiences. And so I'm really trying to help boys at this age learn to speak their truth and not laugh when it's not funny to them. And for the other boys to say, to check in, like, hey man, are you okay with this? And then, to be able to say, no, I'm not okay with you doing that or saying that. So we need to try to encourage more of communication between the boys to be sure this really doesn't happen with them. Okay. So questions about that piece. Okay.
Do you see a trend with boys now being able to talk more about like their feelings versus a few years ago?
I definitely think that they can, to some extent. I think when they feel safe, they can. But there's still a lot of messaging about boys being more stoic, that, talking feelings is more feminine, that it's more vulnerable. We're still getting a lot of those messages. And so definitely, I think where they're safe at home, for example, or some of their closest friends and that kind of thing, I definitely think we're seeing a difference. But we have to keep trying to move that bar of this idea that, you have to be stoic, or that you can't be vulnerable and be strong. You can be strong and vulnerable. And so really, I think we've got to keep working with the adults, males around them. So their dads, their uncles, their grandparents, their teachers, that are modeling that you can be emotional and emotionally intelligent and vulnerable, and that makes you actually stronger, not less strong.
Do you have tips to get that moving for their role models who aren't emotionally intelligent?
Well, I think that, it's interesting, and I don't know if you're finding this or not, Layla, but one of the things that I'm noticing is that the dads are really wanting their sons. I mean, they've started working with them as toddlers and now they're growing up, and they want their sons to be more emotionally intelligent and feel more confident about being vulnerable and emotional than they are or had been, but they don't know how to do it. So, for example, I had this one father and son come in, and the boy is 12, and the boy, they were talking, the boy started to cry, and the dad was very cool, and he put his arm around him, really supportively, and he said, it's okay, it's okay, son. He was like telling him he could cry, and that boy just flipped his arm off his dad's arm off of him, and he turned to him and he said, well, why don't you ever cry? So he was pointing out, you can talk till you're blue in the face, but if you're not going to model for me that this is how men can be, then don't be telling me I can cry, because that's not what you're telling me. So I think we really have to be able to say to dads, it's like, it is cool. Don't get me wrong. I really like that you're telling the boys, they can cry and that they can, be emotional. But, really what you got to sort of model this. You got to stop saying that your eyes are watering when you see a sad movie. No, you're crying. Your eyes are not watering. You're crying at this sad movie. So we just have to keep trying to move that bar for adult men so that they can start modeling a more authentic emotional life for their younger people.
Candice, do you have a suggestion for, like, if their father's not in the picture, if they don't have any really good strong male role models in their family, if you give a recommendation for like how you would do that?
Well, so here's what's really interesting, you guys. What we know, interestingly enough, is that those boys are turning out to be the most emotionally intelligent, because they're not getting conflicting emotions. They're being raised by women who are talking feelings, who are being open, who are, managing their feelings because they aren't putting everything into anger. They're, so what we're seeing is they actually are functioning higher without men in their lives in that way. Do you see what I'm saying? But that is not what we need. Is everybody clear? It's like, we don't need them not to have men in their lives, for God's sake. We need to have men who can model a healthy emotional life in their lives. But, we're looking for healthy humans. And so sometimes we don't get the choice if that's males or females, depending on what the circumstances are. So health is still the priority. And ideally looking to see if we can find healthy men who are doing that. If that's a school teacher, if that's an uncle, it's like, we just need them to have some of those models. Okay, anyone else about that? Okay, let's talk about your 12-year-old. Now, 12 is your year of equilibrium. So we still have the same brain development stuff happening that we'll talk about more, but 12 of all three of these years, 11, 12, 13, 12 is your year where you get a little breather from some of the negativity that you had and felt at 11. So they're more comfortable, they're more secure, they're more confident in themselves, they're more gracious about what mothers are doing, more gracious about what teachers are doing. They're more benevolent about siblings and other people's behavior. They like their relationships in their family to be more smooth at 12 than they do at 11 and 13. They're not quite as sensitive in terms of that imaginary audience. They just are a little more confident in who they are. They do like to be with their peers more than their family now. So they may say to you again, they want to stay home. They want to go to hang out with friends rather than do family events with you. They do prefer to be alone at home again, like we talked about. They are a little more cooperative, a little more enthusiastic about helping around the house again. But friends are still the major source of their focus, of their esteem, of their interest. So that love and belonging is still very, very, very active at 12. They are very interested in people's ideas and responses to things. They are interested in politics, that kind of thing, and humanistic kinds of issues, again, in a way that we haven't seen for a while. They're very sensitive about not being too good at 12. So they don't want to be too nerdy, too smart, too nice. And so that's a little hard to see, because you'll see them sort of trying on being, I'm not that smart. You'll see them saying that they got a C in a class and they got an A in a class, but they don't want somebody to think that they're too smart. So you'll see them doing some weird stuff. You'll see kids at this age posting they'll post something to each other, or they'll text each other something like, oh, my dad was just, had way too much to drink and he's an asshole tonight. And you're like, Dad did not drink and Dad was not an asshole tonight. But they're doing that because they're wanting to look like everybody else who has parents and everybody else who hates their uncool parents right now. And so they'll make up these little weird things to say that are hurtful, when parents see them, like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. But if you understand, they just want that love and belonging and to feel like they're like everybody else. So they'll do some weird stuff like that. And so when you confront them about it, don't be sort of freaking out and reactive. Just sort of be like, whoa, bud, do you understand that everybody sees this? And that, and just kind of give them some coaching, but just understand where that kind of stuff is coming from. They blame other people. They're very blameful at this age. They generally have a pretty good sense of humor, and that's a relief, because 11 doesn't have much of a sense of humor and 13 has no sense of humor. So it's it's nice to have a little bit of sense of humor at 12 back again, and to see that. They get tired and they don't recover easily. They really just bomb. And so this is one age where I do say to parents, if they've had a really busy week, and you don't think anything too big is going on, no big tests or anything, I will offer kids R&R days. I'll say, do you just need to stay home and just have an R&R day? They don't get to pick R&R days, but if you sort of see that they're sort of really been burning the candle at both ends and are really not functioning, it's okay to say, let's do an R&R day, because they really do just get so fatigued at this age. They're very conscious of the pains in their body. Again, a lot of complaints about foot pain, some face pain they'll talk about. You'll still see a lot of those tics that we talk about. A lot of the things that you see at 12 are a lot of throat clearing. So they do a lot of all the time. It's just a tic. You'll see that blinking still. You also start to see stuttering again. And stuttering is just neurological immaturity, you guys. We see it generally from when kids start to talk at around 2. We'll see stuttering up until about age 7. And that's when that gray matter starts to thicken again. So we see the same thing happen now. We'll see kids stutter until they get to be about 14, and then that stuttering drops off completely. Your job is not to draw any attention to it. Just act as if they are talking completely normally. If you draw attention to it, or you say start over again, or you say slow down, or if you say the word for them or whatever, that's going to make them self-conscious, and that's where we see stuttering become not neurological. That's when it becomes a behavioral issue. So, just understand stuttering's normal part of this brain development right now. And our job is just to patiently listen till they get those words out. Okay, so questions about that. Okay, sexuality wise, sex is very interesting at 12. They're interested in the process. They're interested in what motivates that. They are looking for information anywhere. So again, this is when you want to have some good resources available. They are bottomless pits. They could eat constantly. They're not at all finicky, which is a relief after 11 when they're so finicky. And they're interested in cooking, and cooking is a great thing to encourage at 12. So they don't object to bedtimes, but they do need reminders to go to bed. The other thing we see is they do a lot of nesting at this age. So you'll see them go in and they're kind of moving stuff around in their rooms and putting things away on their desks. But I just want to warn you, it's like they're not cleaning their rooms. They're nesting. So they're just kind of moving shit around. Is everybody clear? It's not like they're really getting rid of shit. They just move it around. But it's sort of their way of sort of trying to get centered and get themselves to go to bed. So you'll see some of that nesting behavior.
How long does that nesting period last? Because I think I have a 15-year-old that's nesting.
Okay, so if you have a 15-year-old, it's probably more likely at that age, it's probably more likely temperamental. And that's how they just have figured out how to get themselves centered to go to bed. And that's fine. That's great. Actually, it's a good behavior to have. Okay, so they do go to bed early, but they go to bed early and they want to read or listen to music. They're very restless sleepers. They talk in their sleep a lot, but they actually sleep pretty good. They just are very restless and talk a lot in their sleep. This is the age where they've got the dirty fingernails, dirty hands, that they didn't have at 11, but they do have that. And generally, they're pretty conscious of their clothes and style, but not quite so sensitive about having to be a certain way as they were at 11. Emotionally, a lot of anger still. We see a lot of it at 11. We see a lot of it at 12. Still see a lot of it at 13. But they love wholeheartedly. They're really way more open about that. They think they're more optimistic. They think they have good luck. Which is nice. They minimize their feelings some, but it's just a much more emotionally stable age than 11 and 13 are. A little bit jealous, especially with siblings, but even that is not too bad. And it's not a competitive age. It's actually a really sweet age. School-wise, they're enthusiastic. They're pretty cooperative. They're still not stellar students, and we'll talk about why in a little bit here. They're interested in a lot of different things. They're relatively independent. They like to be challenged. They're more easily focused. I wouldn't call them easily focused, but more easily focused at 12. And they do not like rigid schedules. They are very resistant to rigid schedules, and they're pretty quick to volunteer. So you can see the difference between how that year of, even though they're in the same brain development, when they're in a year of equilibrium with that brain development, it manifests really differently than when they're in a year of disequilibrium with that brain development. Okay, so questions about 12. Okay, so 13, big year of disequilibrium. It brings people to their knees, especially mothers to their knees. So there's a big change between 12 and 13. At 13, they're much more sensitive and selective. They're very introspective and withdrawn. This is an age where a lot of people talk about their kids spending a lot of time in their rooms and don't come out. They don't want to do anything with the family. They're incredibly active in thought. They just are constantly thinking, constantly worrying. They're busy, busy, busy. They never get tired. Nothing's too hard for them. They're friendly, but not spontaneous. They'll be courteous, but not spontaneous. They speak in this really, especially the boys, in this very low, slow way that makes you go crazy. They do this. Will you get me a glass of water? And you're like, what, honey? When you're get me a glass of water? And you're like, what? Will you get me a glass of water? And if they're saying, would you get me a glass of water? But they won't enunciate. They won't speak up. They just do that, and it just makes you want to go crazy. But it's just part of that development that they're doing. They think before they answer now. They're more honest. They don't tell secrets. The bad part of this is they don't tell secrets. So this is an age where I really ask parents to talk about, there's a point where you really do keep secrets, and there's a point when it's health and safety that's more important than a secret, because they will keep secrets about abuse. They will keep secrets about kids who are cutting on themselves. They will keep secrets about rapes. They will keep secrets. And sometimes those secrets, and then they'll be trying to take care of each other. And 13-year-olds are not in any kind of developmental position to be taking care of really serious issues. Is everybody clear about that? So we really need to say that, it's wonderful that you are loyal and you want to keep secrets, but their health and safety always, always comes above that secret telling or keeping with kids. The thing that is probably most obvious is they have sharp, I don't even know how to say it emphatically enough, of sharp, continual criticism of especially mothers. The mothers are their focus, and they are relentlessly critical. From the minute they wake up until the minute they go to bed, they can't do anything right. They don't talk right. They don't dress right. They don't laugh right. They don't cook right. And even parents who know this is normal, it's just so incredibly exhausting and erosive to have somebody telling you all day long how inadequate you are, that, literally it just brings mothers to their knees. And so it isn't unusual that you just end up crying. It's just so relentless. But I do want to warn parents that you have to cry strong. Is everybody clear about this? And by that, I mean, if you do why are you doing this? All I do is try to treat you nice. They will be on you. It will just get worse. But if you can have those tears coming down, but be sort of like, that's enough. You just need to lay off me, but you're crying. They will correct their behavior for a week or so. And then it sort of starts up again. So it's not personal. And I do want parents to know that this isn't personal. And if you personalize it, it just makes it worse. But it's also incredibly hard to tolerate and to live with. Okay, so questions about that piece. Okay, now I think
why are the moms always the target?
Well, they are up until about, we don't know why for sure. That's a good question. We know that moms get to be the targets up until about 14, and then it gets distributed both ways. And then oftentimes it shifts to where dads are the target and moms are sort of the ones, who are the good ones. But up until about 14, it is moms. And we used to think it was because they were the primary caretakers. That is not the case now. We have dads who are primary caretakers, and moms are still getting that same focus. So there still is incredible socialization, though, that diminishes women's worth. Is everybody clear about that? And so in any kind of system, we pick on the pecking order. So, you know, older siblings pick on younger siblings who pick on younger siblings. And if you don't have a younger sibling, you pick on the dog, you know. So we're wondering now if it's because the socialization is still so powerful that women are here on the pecking order. And particularly as they start to get to the same size as, you know, a full grown woman, now it's like they may even see you lower on the pecking order. So we've got some socialization stuff to keep working on for sure.
I have a
And
question in regards to, so my family in particular, we're a blended family, and I have a 13-year-old, and I know that we're at that stage of despising moms. And I wanted to, because I'm the stepmom, I don't get that same treatment, obviously, but I want to, I don't know, be somehow supportive
yeah,
as best I can. And how could, or what could that look like, especially during this? Because I know how I was like when I was a teenage little girl, and it
yeah,
wasn't
that's
that.
really cool if you could help with it. And honestly, it would be great. It's a fine line because you don't want it to shift to you. You know what I'm saying, Beth? It's like it's important that you keep your relationship. So I don't want you to lose that. But you know, just doing things like at times reframing something. So let's say that she's critical about her mom limiting something she does,
Mhm.
that you would say, oh, I can imagine, because I probably would be really scared too.
Yeah.
Do you see what
I
I'm
think that's
saying?
kind of what I know exactly what you're saying, because I do know there are certain circumstances, and I'm like, I understand where she's coming from, because she's so scared that you might get kidnapped. That's why she doesn't want you walking home from school
Right,
alone.
right. Or, you know, if you know any of her history, you could say, I think that's a really hard thing because of, what your mom grew up with.
Yeah.
Something that helps that child be compassionate
Yeah.
without necessarily saying that their perception was wrong.
Okay.
So yeah, you're definitely on the right track.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Going back a little bit when you're talking about, not taking it personal, and it's really important not to do that and stuff. I think that can create like that habit, like a vicious cycle then.
Yes.
So if we don't handle it in a way of not taking it personal, can it extend that behavior out past like 13 or 14? Because I've created a habit now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And what's interesting is it's not only, quotes, a habit, which comes because this behavior, if you don't understand it, is so challenging and you're just reacting to it, but also because there is this strong myth that gets focused on that, parents can't get along with children, or particularly mothers and daughters, especially. It's like mothers and teen daughters, you know how it is. They just don't get along. And I hate that, because there's nothing real about that. It's just a rapport issue. And so, if you're kind of caught in that, it's like, just find a way to acknowledge that you got caught in something because you didn't understand, by owning, something yourself. Like, oh my God, I had no idea that, I used to, like, I can't believe how hard I've been on you about reminding you about things. I didn't know it was your brain, It's like, oh my God, like, by owning something, it goes a long way to start to repair. And then you just start repairing and disclosing, and some of that can be turned around. So you're not stuck with it for the rest of your life. You can repair it, but it's a really easy, slippery slope to go down and then get stuck in. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
How would you recommend like building a relationship with your teen with so much internet influence, like social media influence?
I think that one of the things that I would do is, I mean, their influence, don't get me wrong, you guys, not to say that there's not influence there, but I think that even before social media, and especially now with social media, that parents really feel like they don't have a lot of influence. And your kids don't necessarily, when they're adolescents, they're not very acknowledging, they're disdainful. They think they know more than you. Some of those things are very real, but they are watching you like hawks. And I'm telling you, when I have kids in counseling, there's nothing more important to them than what their parents think about them. Nothing, not even their peers. And so, we have more impact than we think we do. And I think when we get scared, we go down that place of being critical and punitive and things, and that just undermines rapport. And I think reminding yourself is that your kids need you, they want you, and to really say to yourself, it's like they're watching you like hawks. Like, what we know is that we see a lot of exploration at this age, 11, 12, 13. We see quite a bit early high school as well. We see some less of it as kids get older. By the time your kids are 25 years old, statistically, they're going to be just like you. 95% of them are just like you. And so if there's anything you should be scared of, it's that. Is everybody clear about that? It's like you need to be watching yourselves because they are watching you like hawks. And they're going to be just like you.
Erase my whiteboard and restart.
Exactly. Okay, so on with the 13. Health-wise, it's a sick year again. A lot of illness, but not as much as 11 and 12. Lots of complaints about stomach pain, chest pain. This is anxiety, you guys. High anxiety at 13. So you're going to hear a lot of that. But they do have physiological things. And one of the things they have is very sensitive skin. So you don't get into fights about why aren't you wearing a sweater? You need to wear a coat. It's cold. You can't wear shorts to school. It's like, just don't go down that road. We're lucky we live in an environment that's never that dangerous to be undressed. And they have incredibly sensitive skin. They can't stand wool touching them. They can't stand things tight on them. So part of this is just developmental from that brain development again. 84% of females, 68% of boys say they or their friends smoke. And smoking now is, anybody?
Vaping.
It's vaping, pot, basically. And I'm just saying this because I think people forget and kind of like want their heads in the sand a bit, that their kids aren't exposed. All of your kids are exposed. Is everybody clear? They're all exposed. When you can say, when 84% of them can say they are their friends, they're exposed. So you got to start talking about it. You got to start talking about what the concerns are, etc. So 60% of them, they or their friends are drinking. Most of that drinking is happening in your home at this age, you guys. So it's time to see where your liquor is. It's time to, consider, do I need to sort of put it away? Because generally it'll be just they're home alone with a friend or home alone even, and they just want to try it. They start sort of using some of your liquor. So just know you're there now. It's like it's not like in a couple years, you're there now. In terms of outlets, we're seeing less of that ticky stuff, but we still see it when they're tired or stressed. Physical growth wise, I want to talk about this just a little bit in terms of sexuality. So by the time girls start their period, they have 95% of their growth. They're pretty much full grown at the time they start their period. There's going to be a tiny bit of growth left. So these girls at 13, especially if they're wearing makeup, they look like these amazing, developed, beautiful, hot young women. And your boys at 13 haven't even gone to their first growth spurt until 14. So they look like these little boys who have these sexy girlfriends who are leading them astray. They are not. Is everybody clear about this? They have different bodies, but their brains are the same. These boys are not being led astray by these girls. So don't go down that road. Is everybody clear about this? It's like they're the same kids with different bodies. There's a lot of sort of girl blaming at this age because the boys still look so young. Okay, so questions about that?
I had a little bit of a question in regards to, I have a plethora of age ranges in my family. And I'm dealing with like body insecurity, and that leads to a lot more insecurities, I feel like. And I feel like I'm the only one in this boat that is trying to help empower this young woman who is developing more than her parent figures, like as far as physical development is concerned. And so she is bigger than I or her mom, and so she's really self-conscious about that. And then intent also, is having a hard time using her voice with saying things that she wants or likes or doesn't like.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to approach that conversation gently without damaging like self-image more than she already feels insecure about.
I think you're better off anyway, unless she brings it up to you. I think you're better off doing little sound bites.
Okay.
So, when you see her doing something, point out your envy of her strength, for example, or your envy of her, her body type in some way. It's like, what I wouldn't do to be 4 inches taller, you know? Just that statement can be profound. Or, it's like, you can wear so many more styles of clothes than I could. That must be fun, you know? Just like we have different bodies, and just being sure that you're countering some of the negative messaging that she may be getting.
Okay.
About her body.
I know that her mom is super conservative, and she's at this like kind of balance where she wants to express her fashion and her own sense, but also is feeling a lot of shame in regards to wearing certain things that.
Well, here's one of those ways that you can reframe that for them, because we're going to talk a lot about this, particularly starting now and, through high school. There's a lot of shaming around this, and it's coming from fear. Is everybody clear about this? I mean, for example, in a counseling session, this dad said, well, I just told Hannah she's dressing like a slut. And I'm like, oh my God, for a dad to say a daughter is dressing like a slut is devastating. Is everybody clear about that? And she's not. She's wearing a cute low cut, top, or wearing a little halter top or whatever. It's like she's beginning to enjoy and experience what it feels like to express her sexuality. But what's really came up for that dad, of course, is fear. He's scared is what he is. So when we're scared, because we grew up with this, we blame the victim. Is everybody clear about this? It is so incredibly important that you don't blame the victim. So when she kind of talks about that, you'd say, when she wears something, then you can tell she's proud of it, and it may be more revealing. You can say, it looks like you feel really good, or you look super cute. You can give her compliments. If she says, oh, mom won't let me wear this because she said it's inappropriate, you say, well, babe, I probably, if you weren't here and I wasn't here to sort of protect you, It's like I would say to my daughters, for example, I would say, you know, Lissy, I don't want you wearing that to Seattle. And I'd say, I don't want you wearing that to Seattle because there are still so many people with such terrible boundaries that I can't be there to protect you.
I like
So
the idea of using boundaries that other people don't have boundaries.
exactly, because it's not about, I mean, you should be able to go nude. And I'd say that to him. I was like, you should be able to walk around Seattle nude if you wanted to, honey. But people, there are just way too many people out there.
Well, and I kind of, one of the conversations that I had is, you know, one of her mom is super conservative and won't let her wear holy jeans. And I had said, you know, here, you know, we're around family most of the time and I don't mind because I wear them, and what you wear doesn't mean, like, doesn't make you who you are. Like I had tried to like ease it because I feel like her mom was saying like we don't dress like sluts here. And
Yeah,
I kind of
you know, you
emphasize
could
that like
say
because
that,
you're wearing those clothes does not make you a slut.
but you have to add the rest of it, Beth.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the truth is, there still are people who do
You
think
don't.
what you wear is tells who you are.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
you can say that is not true.
Mhm.
And there are still people who have that. And that's why your mom gets scared.
I think I like that framing. It makes it a lot more simple that it's not about her specifically. It's about other
Exactly.
people and your safety.
Exactly. It's not about her.
I
Exactly.
I feel like the school system too does not handle that well.
Yeah.
Like my kids' school, they told all the girls that they were not allowed to wear tank tops because it might put thoughts in the boys' head. And I'm like, that's
Exactly.
actually derogatory for boys and girls because you're telling girls that they're ready.
Exactly.
It's also not giving boys any credit either, like they can control their own minds or their own reactions. And I'm like, that's really a negative for both. And the school,
Absolutely. And I want parents to go and start really, you know, making some fusses about some of that, because that has been the case for generation after generation after generation. And it definitely feeds right back into all the belief systems that girls are responsible, that boys don't have to be responsible. It's like,
A
good Lord, what
misogynist
kind of
culture.
message are we giving boys that says that they don't have to have some level of self-control and respect and, you know, body sovereignty issues? So, you know, we have to start challenging the schools' policies around this. Okay. Anybody else about that? Okay. So, emotionally, really tough, you guys. It's like they just are not good natured almost ever. They are nicer again away from home, though. I do want to say that they're secretive, they're pessimistic. It's hard. It's hard to be with a 13-year-old. But what I want to remind you is hard to be a 13-year-old. It's not like they're acting like this. They are this. Is everybody clear? It's like if you think it's hard to live with them, imagine being them, where they're just constantly in thought, where everything seems hard and wrong and difficult. And it's like, it's a hard year. So you're going to try to hold boundaries about appropriate behavior, but at the same time, you're going to be compassionate about how hard it is to be at that place in development. They cry privately now. They cry quite a bit, but they cry privately. And like I said, anxiety is just incredibly, incredibly intense. One thing I do kind of want to warn people about this age, though, is that a lot of them are putting away all their childish things, their doll houses, their dolls, their stuffed animals, their Legos, their, you know, all those things. But you'll notice they're putting them away. They put them into a closet. But they keep them in their rooms, you guys. And the reason for that is they're not done. This is really important. It's like you'll notice that when they feel safe and they want to get grounded, sometimes you'll walk in and here they are playing with them, like when they were kids. They're not done until they say, I want to give my dolls away, or until they say, can, you know, I take these to the Goodwill. It's like, you just let them move through this age. This is really that cusp where 1 minute they want to be grown-ups and the next minute they're still little girls and boys. So you're going to see a lot of that sort of cuspy behavior a lot. School-wise, they're calmer, they're a little more focused because that brain is starting to work a little better, but they're still not stellar students. They're more involved if it's more interactive. That helps a lot. And they're what we call, what would I call it? They're definitely clock watchers. And so clock watchers means that if school's out at 2:20, they're like packing up. The teacher could still be talking, but they're done. They're clock watchers. So we just don't see a lot of stellar behavior still academically, even at 13, sometimes up through 14. Now, before I go to 14, you guys, I wanted you to grab that sheet that says developmental components. Does everybody have that? Okay, so this one is the brain piece that I want people to get aware of. So as soon as that gray matter starts to thin, and until they start getting enough of new synapses developed, which is somewhere around 14 or 15, depending how early they go into puberty. So some kids will see the same behavior even through 14. But when this happens, there's some very significant things. They are incredibly distractible, very, very distractible. So you could go in and say you need to empty the garbage, and you walk out, and 10 seconds later, it's gone out of their head. It is gone. Is everybody clear about this? It is not that they are, you know, messing with you when they say, I forgot. When you walk in and say, did you empty the garbage? You're going to hear a lot of, I forgot, because they did. Is everybody clear about this? This is really what happens in their brains, is that they cannot hang on to things. It's like they literally, it comes in and it goes out, because if there's one little thing that distracts you, you're back out of it again. And so they're incredibly distractible. They're incredibly disorganized. That part of the brain that is about organization is the last part of the adult brain that actually gets developed. So this early part is almost, I mean, I will tell the kids, it's like, you don't have a brain. You know, it's like your brain's almost like gone right now. So you really need to write notes. You really need to have people help you. You really need to remind each other. It's like, I just want them to understand there's nothing wrong with them. They're just at this stage where their brains are not functioning very well. So they do need all the organization skills. They do need their parents checking to see if their papers are getting in, because they are not organizing, or sometimes they even get their papers done, but they don't get them to school. They lose them in a backpack, or they didn't push the button to send it off, or. And so, you know, they need partners right now. And that's what I want people to understand for this age group, is that they don't need disdain. They don't need criticism. They don't need to be put down because they're too old to act like that. What they need to know is they are in an incredibly challenging period in their lives, brain-wise, and that you are going to actually partner them through it. We're going to get through this with, you know, together. Your parents and you are going to figure out how to get through this. And when you turn 14, this is going to be all different again. It's going to be easier. You're going to be more passionate again. It's going to be more fun for you to do things again. It's going to be easier for you to learn again. But in the meantime, we're going to partner through this. And we're going to get through this, and we're going to do it with humor and you're going to do it without disdain. Like parents will say to me, well, I shouldn't have to remind them 50 times. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what you have to do during this period, is remind them. And you will remind them every day, and you will remind them respectfully, because they don't say remind. They'll say, I shouldn't have to, what do they say? Nag. I shouldn't have to nag them about hanging up their coat every day. And I'm like, no, at this age, you're going to be doing it every frickin' day until that brain's functional. And if you do it disdainfully, you are nagging, and that is not acceptable. And so you are going to say, babe, you need to hang up your coat. The next day, babe, you need to hang up your coat. You're going to say it for 3 straight crazy years. Everybody clear about this? And that is what you signed up for. That is what parenting is at this age. And so you don't get to say, I didn't sign up for this. It's like, well, you didn't know you were signing up for it. But the truth is, you signed up. Is everybody clear about this? So you are going to be respectful, and you are going to partner them through this. And I used to tease, especially Alex, my youngest, I'd tease her a lot during this period. And I'd say, oh my God, I am praying that you get through this brain development before I go into menopause, or we are screwed. It's like, I want her to just get that, I'm going to be here in 3 years or 4 years. And then, you're going to laugh at me, or you're going to have to remind me. It's like, this is just a brain, you guys. But if we are telling kids at 11, 12, and 13 that they should be more responsible, that they should be more organized, that they should be this, they should be that, it's like, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then when their brains start to work, they just take that self-fulfilling prophecy right into high school. I'm a bad student. I'm not organized. It's like, no, I don't want them to believe that. Is everybody clear about this? It's like, we've got to be clear that they know that this brain development is going to be completely different in high school. Okay. So questions about that, disorganized. The last one is disinterested. When this happens, you start losing interest in things a lot. So a lot of kids don't want to play music anymore. They say, I want to stop piano. I don't want to be in band. I don't want to play soccer anymore. And when the kids come in, I'll talk to them and I'll say, don't trust your brain right now, you guys. Your brain is disinterested. Don't trust your brain. It's like, do this, and when you turn 14, I'll usually say 14, I'll say, when you turn 14, then if you really don't want to play piano anymore, then if you want to stop soccer, then you can trust your brain. But right now, just don't trust your brain. Just keep playing, because some of these kids are going to get through this and suddenly they are hot to trot for soccer again, or they are really passionate about music again, but they just have to get through this brain development. But if they stop in this brain development, it's really hard to go back, because everybody else is sort of stuck in there. And so you're just trying to keep them there. But what that also means is you have to lay off them. So when I say that to kids, if they come into counseling, I also say, I will talk to your parents if you want me to, because I will then say to the parents, it's like, you have to stop saying that we're going to not pay for piano lessons if you don't practice. You're going to pay for piano lessons just to keep them playing. Is everybody clear? You're not going to say, get your head in the game. You're all distracted. Get your head in the game. You're going to say nothing about their distractibility. You're just going to be sure they keep playing soccer. Is everybody clear about this? Because our job is to get them through this disinterest. Okay.
I have a question about the disorganization and the distractibility as it relates to distance learning or remote learning or hybrid schedules. I have a 13-year-old son, and where we're at in our district, they've recently opened it up for him to be able to go hybrid. And
Yeah.
he has said that he has a hard time. He's been struggling with online learning as it is because he has 7 classes and they're rotating them all the time, and then Wednesdays are different than Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday. And so he said he doesn't want to go hybrid because he thinks that will just add even more onto it. Like he'll have 2 days of his in-school schedule, then he'll have 3 days of online schedule, and one of them will be different. And he says that's too much, and he doesn't want to do it.
I'm amazed that he's that self-aware. That's incredibly awesome, because this age group I think has been the hardest on these kids, because they are distracted and disinterested and disorganized. And so I think this has been incredibly challenging for them. And I have been worried, and I've been saying to parents, it's like, oh my gosh, this was hard enough for them to transition into online. To transition them again into hybrid seems even harder for me, to this age group especially. So I'm kind of impressed that he's that aware of that. And so, if he says if he has the choice and he says, I just want to stay online, I would totally honor that.
He does. Yeah. He wants to stay online because he thinks it would be better than having to. But then the school's like, well, he's struggling with online, so we really feel like he should be back in it. And I'm like, right now I'm trying to, and, I asked him why, and he gave me a very clear explanation of why he felt that way. And so I'm kind of going with what he wants right now. But then again, I know his brain's not fully developed yet either. So, but at this point, I'm like, well, if he feels like it's going to make it worse or even more confusing for him, then I think that would probably be better. He says when they get back full time, he wants to go back in person.
Exactly. Exactly. And then everybody's transitioning at the same time in the same way, etc. Yeah, it's really hard, because this is a really hard time. And I think that there are a lot of people who want kids who want to go back, and that's great too if they want to. But I'm even warning those parents. It's like, don't think this is going to be without challenge, because these kids are having to transition again. And they're going to have to transition, go back and forth every other day to this. So we're talking 6 weeks, which is very little time to transition. Is everybody clear? When you have a new style of learning, it takes weeks. And so I just want people to be realistic. Whatever families want or need to do and choose to do, that's fine. But I want them to be realistic about, it's not going to be a panacea. It could be very challenging. Their kids may be very emotional because they're transitioning. So I'm pretty impressed, actually, that your son was that self-aware. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's a different sort of fellow.
Yeah. So here's the deal, you guys, is that our time is up and we didn't do 14, but I'm okay with that. I think really the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 go better together anyway. And it's easier for us to just put them together. So I think we're okay with that, if you guys are okay with that.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, Candice.
Yeah.